I've been meaning to do this for years. So my father died December 23rd, 2009. And when he passed, my father was John Larson. So when he passed, my mother asked that donations please go to the Barnegat Light Museum. And we run off of a paltry budget here. I mean, sometimes we'd be lucky to have $3,000 or $4,000 in the bank. And $15,000 came through for people so generous in my father's name. So my sister Kathy and I sent out all the thank you notes. We had various discussions with the members here. What should we do with the $15,000? One idea was a gazebo, another idea was a bronze bust, and kind of my mother was part of this decision. Daddy wouldn't like that, Daddy wouldn't like that. So we decided none of that. And his boots have been sitting in the office on 12th Street at my mother's house, and I thought, you know, what better way to honor, for a memory. My father was never in the military. And I just, you know how they have the boots when, you know, people die. So I just thought that would be a great memory of my father's fishing boots. And I'll tell you about those boots, one quick story. So Dad was buying the second Miss Barnegat Light. And he got friendly with the Toms River Bank executives who dressed in suits every day. My father didn't own a suit. And, but they liked my dad. They lent money for that second Miss Barnegat Light. We're currently on the third Miss Barnegat Light. So anyway, the banker calls up and said, I just traded in my Mercedes up at Toms River Mercedes. Why don't you go up there and buy the used Mercedes? I still don't know how he could even afford it back then. So Dad goes up to Toms River, and he has his boots on. So he goes into the showroom, and nobody would wait on him. So he left the showroom, went next door. This is the early 70s. And he went next door, and he went to a payphone and called the Mercedes dealership. He said, I'd like to buy one of those used, well, whatever he said, you know, used Mercedes. And the guy says, well, just come on in. He says, well, I was just there. Nobody would wait on me. So anyhow, he went back. He bought the used Mercedes in his boots. So in doing, I didn't want to make it just about my father tonight. I wanted to put Captain Lou in there because Dad and Lou, not only were they good buddies, they were partners till the day Dad died. And everything was a handshake. There was never an argument. And it just was amazing what they did. Buying Viking Village, which was then called Gay Stop. What was it called back then, correct? No, but then it became Gay Stop.
Yeah.
Big Day.
Big Day owned it. Big Day.
Yeah. Anyhow,
I thought it was the independent dock, and then it was Dicky Day.
right.
Yeah.
And then it was Dad and Louie named it Viking Village, and they bought that because they had just started the tile fishing industry, and they needed a place to pack out. And so they bought Viking Village on a thread and a prayer.
No plan whatsoever.
What?
No plan whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think he did thought he was getting it back, because I think he had sold it a few times before, and he was just like, you can get the knock back.
Oh, they wouldn't pay you?
Yeah,
Foreclosure?
just foreclosed, you get the knock back again. You didn't realize.
No, I never
They
heard
got it.
that.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No, I don't remember.
Did you know?
Yeah, he threw us off the dock.
Worthless.
For fishing on the
He
dock.
used to chase us around the dock.
Worthless.
Well, I hope nobody's related to Dick.
Oh, sorry.
So my father was a very forward thinker in many ways, and even with his children. My brother Keith was supposed to come tonight, but he texted me at 6 o'clock. He says, I can't stop coughing, so he didn't want to come here, which I think is good. But I'll tell Keith's quick story. Keith graduated from, Paul, come on in. Is that Paul?
No.
Oh, it's Matt. I thought it was Paul. I'll introduce people in a second. So Keith graduated from high school. He was just not a book person. He was not going to college. So Dad sent him to, was it Black Cod, Kirk?
Yeah, Black Cod.
He went to a Black Cod boat out in
Alaska.
Alaska.
Southeast Alaska.
He would go out on like 3-month trips. And so he went there when he was 18 years old, came back about a year later, at the age of 19. And not that he made a huge amount of money, but back then houses weren't worth $1 million. He came and bought a house on 9th Street. And he had a great story tonight because my father would push us. So Keith went to where was that meeting where he made Keith speak?
In Nova Scotia, when they were rebuilding I can't remember the town.
No, where he made him get up and talk to him.
Oh, that was in Seattle, yeah.
So they're out in Seattle at the fish shop, the
Fish
fish
fair.
expo or something. And there's hundreds of people, and some guy gave a speech. And anybody got any questions? And my father puts up his hand and says, yeah, you gotta talk to my son Keith over here. He'll tell you all about it. Keith is very shy. So anyhow, so there's some other stories coming through. But let me introduce also, it's not just about my father, it's about Lou Puskas, who was a fabulous guy here in town with his family. So here's John Puskas. He's the youngest of 4 boys. And his wife, Shannon. Matt, come on in to show everybody your
He's
face.
the oldest.
Matt's the oldest.
It's,
You want to go over there? Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Is Paul coming?
I don't know.
We were hoping Paul was.
Yeah, you never know.
And, you guys, if somebody wants to sit here, you can squeeze in here. My brother Carter Larson is here, and my brother Kurt Larson. And, so what did my dad push me to do? Everything.
We're in the alley.
Cali girl.
Galley girl. I'll tell you a story. Nothing was impossible. Karen, you gotta go up to Point Pleasant and pick up some starter. And use Kirk's car. Dad, it's not working for, I think you weren't using it anymore. Dad, it drives terrible. You'll make it. Just get up there. I get to Tom's River, there's no brakes. I called my mother from the same payphone I think that Dad used to buy the Mercedes. You get the hell home here. Don't you listen to him again. That's nothing. So he pushed us. So Carter has a story. So what I'd like to do tonight is I would like the Puskases to talk and the Larsons to talk first. Hopefully not too long, just so we can include anybody else here that would like to tell a Lou Puskas story or a John Larson story or whatever questions you have. So Carter, talk about being pushed at the age of 8. Get up here, Carter. I'm Kirk's number 1, Kirk's number 1, I'm number 2, here's number 5.
Did he use numbers? Did he use numbers? Yep.
Carter always does.
Everybody was a K.
They put them on the jail cell numbers.
So I'll let Carter. So quick tell your story of what Dad did when you were 8 years old. You know, see.
So, Judy Seddon's here, not to put the pressure on you. Judy was in my kindergarten class, 1967,
That's right, yep.
and the thing went well yesterday, by the way.
Oh,
Mayor.
yeah, I'm thinking about y'all.
It was great. I held a tour for the Uvalde School children.
Oh,
They wanted to come for a tour of Viking Village,
nice.
rehabilitation. Judy was involved, and so it went great.
How many were there?
Well, there was only one, but there was a parent, and there was a social worker that saw everything. It was really ugly, tried to keep it low. So, I don't want to tell the story anymore. It's getting old. Parent keeps insisting, but it is kind of unique a little bit. So at the end of 1970, second grade, I woke up today after school. It was a beautiful day, like today. And I thought, I'm going to go out fishing with Dad. And then I thought about it another minute. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. I was like, you know what? I'll do it tomorrow. I'll go play with the Brindley brats today, Dwayne. And I'll go fishing with Dad tomorrow.
There's a Brindley right back there.
There's one of the Brindley brats.
Only one showed up.
He was not in my kindergarten class. And then Dad showed up at 7 o'clock and said, get up, you're going out on the boat. I said, which one? He said, Atlantic Ocean Mead. I knew exactly which one it was. The tuna seiner, the Canadian vessels. And I said, how long? He said, 3 days. I was 8 years old. This is 1970. 3 underwears, 3 socks, 3 shirts. My mom in the background made sure you bring a toothbrush. You know, got a toothbrush. You know those old things we had for suitcases, which had to be made in the 50s.
I think it was the 30s.
So I packed everything up, went out on the boat. Dad's going blue fishing. Casualty on the left. I go out on the Miss Barnegat Light. Boat comes up to Miss Barnegat Light. Anybody know Pete Silverback?
Oh,
Don Myers? Don Myers? This boat comes up to the back of the Miss Barnegat Light, and Dad says, throw him in. So Pete's like, do what? Pete, he had to be 17. And so they threw me in the boat. And
No, my father's was, let him go, he'll be fine.
Hey, fine. Johnny Optimus, Mom called him. He steamed off east blue fishing, and so I go over to this big boat. Nobody on the boat spoke English, but I was with. So we go to the big boat, and 2 cables come down, lift me up to the second deck, and there's the captain sitting there, and his name was John Burridge. By the way, I looked up his son's name. John Burridge Jr. comes right up, picture, everything. His son died in Vietnam the year before. He was very lonely. He knew that Dad had 3 sons, and Dad was running mail to him. Dad can talk to Square Weed or Wednesday to anybody, right? Right? And so he knew Dad had 3 sons, and he wanted Kirk. Because Kirk was 16, and Kirk was working for Buzz Lowling at the time on the salt shaker, if anybody's old enough to know that. Frank. And Dad's like, nah, I can marry halfway. So I showed up, and I get to the second deck, and the guy's looking at me, and he says, not going to do it. And so he goes in the pile house, and I see Dad steaming off, and he calls up Dad and says, John, I can't take this kid. I'm not babysitting. And Dad's like, oh my God, oh, yeah, he's good. You don't have to worry anything. As an 8-year-old, I'm pretty sure what I saw, but I couldn't comprehend as an 8-year-old.
Right.
And he was like, pull up anchor. And we headed east. And east. And east. And we landed in Canada. And anyway, 58 days later it came home. He was great to me. His name is John Birch. His son's name is John Birch Jr. He was killed he was a Marine in Vietnam. And he was lonely, he wanted somebody so he got me. Now, he's not so innocent either. Because that, the thing on the top of the ship was crow's nest. It was 90 feet up. Me and him climbed that up too, and I sat with him all day.
Wow. John Birch,
John Birch.
Was it a tuna singer?
Same.
which is about 200 feet long.
Yeah.
250 feet long, Atlantic Ocean made. If you look up at Team Tennessee,
I remember you telling the story. I didn't believe you though.
Yeah, he brought me up there.
But tell them about the crew, that you didn't speak English and you were teaching them English.
Well, nobody spoke English.
What were they speaking? No, it's French.
Huh?
French, probably.
No,
No, they're
Spanish and Portuguese.
Panamanian.
Okay.
Captain American, California. Navigator from California, English. Engineer from Germany, spoke German. I don't really learned a lot. And I got the Navigator cigars, the Captain coffee. It was a great life.
So, all right, you said they were supposed to go for 3 days, go for 58.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But he worked with the Portuguese and the.
No, there's no Portuguese.
The
No
Spanish.
Portuguese.
So he was
Only
teaching them
Panamanian.
English words.
So the one
So they
kid.
kept them on the boats to teach everyone how to talk.
No. There's a guy on the boat
That's all I
who was the son of the cook from Panama, who was 17, and I'm pretty sure he was running away from the law. I'm trying to gather the
It's all going back.
So they brought him onto the boat to
Protect.
Rehabilitate them.
yeah. So he couldn't even say hi in English, and him and I was like, yeah. So I taught her one word.
Ready?
Anybody?
F-U?
Words.
And he got it.
Okay, here's John Puskas.
These things ring a bell. These were our Christmas gifts every year. I had a pair of Norwegian boots at Christmas, and we were happy.
The original.
Because everybody
The
had the
original.
originals. They were called Norwegians, right? So, I don't know, a lot of people here that knew the old man, Timmy, right? Anybody not know him? Because he knew everybody. I mean, it's like, if you didn't know him, the first thing he would say would be like, Captain Lou, how do you do? Like that was, he always spoke like in rhymes, or he'd sing you a song if you had long hair. But he did a lot for the fishing industry in the town. He always liked to say when they were cod fishing back then, long line cod fishing. I think Frank in the back there, he fished with him.
Yeah, I fished with him a couple of trips. We had the last big codfish trip here out of Barnegat Light. It was over 5,000 pounds.
Yeah, and then I guess the foreigners came in. From the story I got, I was a little young to remember, but they wiped them out. So people really had nothing to fall back on, nothing to do. Like today, we got a couple different industries, but back then it was tough. So I guess he heard of another fish out there that some of the head boats that John had gone out and caught them, rod and reeling, I think, and a couple guys from up out of Manasquan. So he knew they were there, so he was looking for tile fish, and finding a way to catch them was a different story because you couldn't haul the gear in by hand because it was too deep. So when he was in the Coast Guard station up in Alaska, he told me the story that he's watched these guys haul gear with a shiv hauler, and they were catching halibut. He was stationed on a little island up there in the middle of nowhere, pretty much. Severe isolation duty, I guess they call it. Eldridge Rock.
Everybody was in the Coast Guard.
Yeah, when he was in the Coast Guard. And then he learned about the shiv hauler. So he had a method of getting the gear up from deeper water, and that allowed him to go and start tile fishing. Or a lot of other people really didn't realize that at the time. But he always said when he came in with the first trip that you could hear all the engines starting up all around town, all the boat motors going, because everybody really had nothing to do. And it kind of started the whole thing off. So it was good, and you know that John was always had his back with whatever he wanted to do. So it was just a little story of how he got rolling. He's not from here. I think he came in here in like 1957, 58, something like that. When were you born?
59, but usually like 55.
55 he came. Well, his grandfather, or his father, my grandfather, he was a mason. So they used to go to Forked River, but he did a lot of work in town, and he built brick houses. I don't know if there's any left, but there was a handful of them still floating around town.
Firehouse.
Oh,
He did the foundation for the hall of the firehouse.
yeah, right. And then there was a lot
Your
of.
dad did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There was a few houses on 9th Street.
Yeah.
like up behind the water tower.
Your walls are there.
And are they still there, a couple of them? So when he was younger, he came here, so we knew the place. And he fished out of here a little bit, but mostly out of Forked River. But he told me that he came up from Florida with a boat right after he married my mom, and they kind of landed here on their way back over. And I guess somebody's boat broke down, and they needed somebody to take over the charter for the deck. So he said he took them over to Myers Hole, which is right where all the sailboats are now, and fished there, and they had like the best day ever, and he just stayed and kept doing it, and got involved in Barnegat Light, never left. You know, next thing you know, he comes along. Ruins everything. That's all I got for you, just kind of open up. If you got any questions about it, just ask me.
Matt, you want to say something?
No, they pulled out a day ruler.
Right, right.
Everybody gets-
Art, you want to say something?
Yeah, I got a story or two.
Oh, jeez. Getting better than my story.
You gotta say your name and address.
Kurt Larson, yeah,
No, no.
18 East 13th Street. We make Tim say that at every council meeting, even though we know where he lives. No, I want to just say a little bit about my dad. We used to always cut these things off though.
Yeah.
Because if they hang up in the net, it drags your leg over the side with the rest of your body to the bottom. These little hooks on the side. But anyway, my dad, like Karen was saying, he'd push and push and push. I mean, as soon as he saw I could actually work, I was baiting tubs for codfish and opening clams, and you know, when he bought his new boat in the 60s there, the second Miss Barnegat Light, we started offshore codfish trips out to these old wrecks. My dad he was always looking for something new, so he had the first like sonar that they used to use for finding submarines during the war or whatever it was. And he had one on his boat. Louis had one on his boat too. And they found all these virgin wrecks out there that were just full of codfish, old 15, 20, 30 pounders, along with pollock swimming all around the top. It was unbelievable fishing. But he never had an autopilot because he didn't have any money, you know, after he built the boat. So I was the guy that steered all the way out. 6 hours with a slow boat to China. But in between that and the cod fishing before the Russians came in and kind of cleaned the whole place out, there was not much left out here. And most of the wrecks were all, by the time they got done, the Russians and the Poles and the Czechs got done, all the wrecks were all covered with nets, and they made a mess of the whole place. So, it goes round and round, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But anyway, Louis had found these tilefish offshore, and like I said, the cod fishing was done. There was no bluefish here at the time. And everybody was looking for something to do. And like Paul or John was saying, as soon as Louis got in with a couple of trips of 3,000-4,000 pounds, and we were unloading the Mount Myers dock over here, which is lighthouse marina now. And they wanted their own place because they didn't want to pay Dick Myers for packing fish over there. That was a clam dock at the time. They unloaded clammers over there. So Dick Day had made a deal with Henry Gigliotti to buy Viking Village, which became Viking Village. And Henry said, you know what? I don't want to buy it. So John and Louis came in and made him an offer. And I don't know, he must have held some of the money or something, but they ended up buying the dock. The place was rat-ridden. Carter, you could get up and tell that story about hunting rats for years.
Hundreds.
Oh, my God.
That was a lot of fun.
Because it was, because Viking Village at the time was all wooden planks. And then the land came up from underneath. So the rats just swam around and ate everything that dripped through the planks, all the blood and guts. It was pretty disgusting, but the kids all had a great time. Trapping big rats. But anyway.
Can I just quick interject one
Yeah.
quick story? So Carter and Brinley's and whoever else used to go to the lighthouse, the dock, to trap rats, and they would skin them. And Carter told my mother, this is serious, he was saving his pelts to make her slippers. So people ask me sometimes, what's it like growing up in Barnegat Light back then? So people say, watch out when you tell that story.
When people come to meetings at the Borough Hall and say, I don't know what to do with my kids, can't you guys find something to do for them? I'm like, we always found things. So anyway, Louis started catching these tile fish. And my dad was going to get into it too, but right before that, a friend of mine who's married to the mayor at Cape May, of Beach Haven right now, or the old mayor, Debbie Waitcraft, he was working on the boat, and he said, I'm not going back out on that boat unless you buy a raft, which was an inflatable raft, one of those ones you pull the string. So Louis and Fran, his wife, hemming and hawing, okay, we'll buy a raft. So all of a sudden, Jim, the guy before me, he says, I have to go to Colorado. Can anybody take my place? And I said, well, I don't know. I got a girlfriend. I don't think I want to go. And my dad said, you're going.
Plus you were in school.
Well, I was in high school. It was my senior year of high school. 17 years old. Child labor. Child labor. So anyway, I got on the boat, 17 years old. It was the 24th of March. We went out 75 miles off in this wooden charter boat. It was about 50 foot long. It was a pretty nice boat. Had an automatic pilot and the heat and, you know, something to eat and a nice engine. And we set our tubs, our old codfish gear we set that was baited with clams. And the boat was full right up to the railing with tilefish. So we started on our way home. And I was sleeping, it started blowing about 30 or 40 miles an hour, pretty rough, and right straight into it, about 34 degrees outside, something like that. And all of a sudden, I wake up and Louis yelling, fire, fire, fire. So I look up and jump up, I still got my boots on, bare then, and my jeans and a flannel shirt. And he says, run up, jump up on the top and grab the raft. So I didn't have a knife, because the knife was in the back of the boat. And the flames were coming out the back door. And so I climbed up on the roof, and he was fooling around trying to get the fire out. Couldn't do it. So by the time I got the raft off, I handed it to him up on the bow, and the bow had a railing around it. So he pulled the string, and whoosh, thing blew up on the bow. By that time, we're sideways. The wind's blowing about 30. Flames are coming over the side, out the back of the cabin. And we threw it over the side. I looked down, holy crap, I gotta jump in that little, you ever see them? They got a little door in. So I jumped down in there and he came down, jumped in with me, and I'm looking around, where are the paddles? They give me these little paddles, they're about this long. So we're trying to get away from this boat that's just blazing because the wind's blowing 25. So you can imagine how the fire is just being fed by oxygen. So we're paddling this little thing trying to get away. Well, the wind blew us around the bow and then sucked us into the side where the flames were coming over. And pow, the thing that holds the pontoon that holds the top up got burned and all the air came out. The whole roof caved in, you know. We're still paddling like that. And somehow we got away with one pontoon left. But the seas were coming in. So we had to figure out how to bail this thing out. So we found a bailer. And we were bailing this thing out. Finally we got away from the boat. It seemed like time flew by. Because by daylight. In March it probably gets daylight around 6 or something like that, I imagine. 6 o'clock. So I saw the boat finally sink. And we were there by ourselves, no radio, no cell phone.
How far out were you?
We were about just in the shipping lanes, as it turned out, on the east side of the shipping lanes, which is where they want to put the windmills. So, so we sat there, and Louis was blind. He never could see very well. So he says, Kurt, you see anything? And I said, I think I see a tanker. So I said, Louis, light a flare. And I didn't know how to light a flare. So you all ought to really learn how to light a flare. Even if you're on a road crash or accident. But, so Louis lights a flare, he holds it up. And I said, Louis, I think I see a guy run out. And it was about a 600-foot tanker. One with a cabin in the middle, a little cabin with the stern. And I said, light another one. And he runs out with another guy. And I said, I think they see us, Lou, and light another one. So he lights the last flare. And then all of a sudden the tanker turned for us. And that was after we were in the water for about 8 hours. So we were pretty cold from the waist down. So before that all happened, I had to go to the bathroom. I was told a little earlier, check out the crowd before you say this. But from my surfing days, I was in the bathroom in my wetsuit that day. I said, well, maybe I'll go on my boot. So I got one boot and it was like heaven. You saved the other half for the other. Just heavy. But anyway, the ship went upwind of us, and all the sailors on the top were leaning on the rail, looking at us down there, and they were blocking the wind. So they threw this rope ladder over, and there was no way we were climbing or even paddling over to climb up. And all of a sudden, out of the blue comes a 325-foot Coast Guard cutter heading for New York. So they were notified by the tanker, and they dropped a double-ender and came over, pulled us out of the boat, took us on the ship, helped us down the infirmary, put us in a warm, I think it was a cold bath, but it felt like it was 50 degrees. So they gave us some dry clothes. We went down, we still smoked at the time. Bought a couple packs of cigarettes. Bought a souvenir lighter, and we went into Governor's Island in New York. And then my mom and Frank, Louis' wife, came up and picked us up.
I remember that morning. My mom told me when you guys.
1972, March 25th.
Yeah.
And I remembered it to this day.
I was with his girlfriend, getting out of the car, and it was blowing. And I remember saying to her, I hope they don't sink. That's exactly what I said.
When we left?
No, that night when we sunk. I was it was June.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, and I said, it was blowing. I said, I hope they
It
don't
was blowing,
sink.
and it was cold. We were making ice on the cutter on the way to the.
Were you able to get off any kind of communication before you went down? Nothing?
Radios in those days were.
Yeah.
What'd you say? What'd you say? You know,
Yeah.
kind of sketchy. We were 25 miles off, and meanwhile the antenna was probably on fire. But anyway, that was my experience.
So when Mother and Fran went to pick them up on Governor's Island, you made, I don't know if it was the Post or the Daily News, you made the centerfold.
Yeah, it's still in there.
And there's Kurt standing there like this. And my mother was hunting him, and he could care less.
At least he didn't have his boot out that he used.
I don't remember having those boots. Anyway, if anybody has any questions?
He's still a centerfold.
Any questions? Anybody want to go next trip? But I've been, child labor in those days. After my brother's story and this story, I was 17. Child labor was, we loved what we were doing. So I jumped right back on a charter boat the next weekend that I was working on and went out the ocean, went fishing and did everything. Next thing you know, I was getting married and had babies and my own boat. And
It's all downhill from there.
And his dad had sunk another boat in the inlet there a couple years later. Anyway, yes,
Who started the fire?
we think it was a fuel filter. It was a diesel, but it was a new Caterpillar that he put in the boat and just turn the filters on like you do today. But the gaskets weren't that good, so the pressure going into the filter was sending out this mist.
Yeah.
And there was a hot turbocharger right next to it. that we think that's what lit it on fire. Maybe all we had to do was shut the engine off, but when, you know, everything's going, you kind of don't have a lot of time to think.
Were you scared out there?
I was never scared, no.
Scared, yeah.
You know, I was a Boy Scout till,
Oh, okay.
so I was so they were always looking at, I think that's the food thing, or the survival. Anyway, yes, sir.
Wasn't there a story about your father and this gentleman out here?
Who's that?
Oh, yeah, you know what, I meant to tell that story. Thank you for reminding me, real quick.
Who is that?
It's Jen's.
Oh, Jens Jensen, yeah.
So, when my father was 5 years old, his mother was on 12th Street, the same house we all grew up in. And he was down at Independent Dock with his father at the age of 5, because his mother had just had a baby, our Uncle Carl. So Jens, in that picture up there, he was a Dane, and they called my father Yanni Boy. Yanni Boy, you want to go fishing with me today? Yes! Go ask your daddy. Dad runs to his father. Dad, can I go out with Jens? No! Runs back to Jens. Can you go, Yanni Boy? Yes! All Prince Bulletin, or whatever they call it, closed the bridge looking for little Yanni Boy. And as my mother's, because there was no radios back on those tiny little net boats that they had back then. And my mother always said, nobody ever told him no again. And that's kind of how us kids were. You just didn't say no to your father. You know, get in that car that doesn't work and get up there. You just did it. No matter the consequences.
You know, nowadays everybody says you get into the fishing business. How are you going to make it? How are you going to do this? Well, the old days, the harder you worked, the more you made, and the luckier you got. Nowadays, they have so many rules and regulations. You got to go by them first, and then anything after that is cheap. So, you know, it's really hard to start in the commercial fishing industry today because of so many rules and regulations, which was only because of the increase in the amount of fishermen, and we were cleaning a few things out before we got our brains together and learned how to keep the fishing sustainable. So we've done a good job of that, and we're hoping that the fish here, scalloping's been good. A little bit to the east. I mean, we're fishing east of Nantucket right now, but we're still bringing them back here, and there's still tilefish. Tuna boats are coming in, scared of the hurricane. And they all have tunas today, and there's one of our boats, Carinel team member, loads tilefish today.
No,
So
tuna.
No, Carinel had tuna, but the Lucky 13 had a load of tilefish yesterday. So anyway, this is where we are today.
Linda, do you want to say anything?
I miss Lou too.
We have one more Larson here. Please stand up, James.
You know what? I will say something.
He's one of the grandchildren. His mother was my sister who passed away.
I want to say something actually about Poppy real quick, because one thing that always stuck with me and always inspired me about what he did was whenever he saw somebody that was either young or didn't have a job, or like Uncle Kirk said, was just about at the age where he could potentially work, he pushed me.
I'm like 7 years old.
Six, five, like him probably, and he got you a job. He encouraged you to do it and believed in you before you even believed in yourself, and he did that for so many people. When I saw him doing that, and after he passed away in '09, and I started to get into working on the boats, I really started to look at what he did for others. I wanted to do that for my friends and people my age, so I wanted to get everybody I possibly could working on the Miss Barnegat Light, the scallop boats, the dock, whatever it was, and it's honestly pretty cool to look back and see how different people's lives were by just getting someone a job at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. So if there's anything that was inspiring that I'll never forget, it's the fact that he always pushed you, like Uncle Kirk, to work even if you weren't quite ready yet, or if you didn't think you were ready yet. So I'll leave it there. But
Thanks, James. I don't know, some of you, I know Maureen does, knows my friend Nicholas. He's a young kid, was he 24 now? And he met my father when he was 6. down at Viking Village. We Larsons grew up with his father and his brothers, and his father is a Katowski, whatever. So Nicholas met my father, and he was quite a forward-thinking little kid to begin with. So his father introduces him. He says, "Nicholas, this is Captain Larson." They shake hands, and this little 6-year-old goes to my father, "You own all this property?" My father loved him till the day he died. 6 years old that summer, Nicholas was on the boat. Dad bought him slippers, little boots, and he would go down the boat every day, and he would clean the boat, and he would get $1, a bag of chips, and a soda, and the kid was happy. And I think Nicholas ended up running the galley when he was about 10 years old, 9 or 10. And I remember I didn't work, Dad was still alive, so I wasn't working for my mother yet. But Mother always said, "You put that Nicholas in that galley. That galley comes in with $200. Anybody else only makes 10. And he would. He was like my dad. They were the same mold about being pushed. And that little kid likes to be pushed too.
And Aunt Karen, actually, just to add on that, one funny story about that was Nick is my cousin, and my dad and Poppy were in the office one day, and Nick marches up there after he's done helping clean the boat for $1, a bag of chips and a soda. He goes, "Mr. Larson, I think I deserve a raise. $3, a bag of chips, and a soda." And my dad's sitting there like, "Oh my God, this is my nephew, he's gonna get me killed." And Poppy looks at me and goes, "I agree. $100
Nicholas stopped working on the boat summer of 2022 because he graduated from college and he has his dream job with Lockheed Martin in Dallas, Texas. So I know my father, he loved Nicholas. So anyhow, he pushed people, and you're so right how he loved to hire kids, no matter what age. So it's just kind of how not too easy to do that anymore. So open up the room. Timmy, does anybody want to have a story about Lou or my dad or Barnegat Light, or want to say something? Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I got a lot to say.
What's your address?
My parents moved here in '67, and it kind of like the same storyline. My dad kept his boat at Viking Village. Well, it was actually independent dock. It was Sticky Days dock in 72, 71, 72. And then 73, it was Viking Village, and then my dad and 2 other partners bought Lighthouse Marina. And then we moved our boats over there. But I have to say, it almost seemed like growing up as a young kid in Barnegat Light and seeing all the parents and how hard they worked. They just had, and it was a lot of them, Charlie Ebley, and Teddy Weeks, and Skip Gallimore, Donnie Mears. The Mears boys are still running the Monica and Francis Inn. Just the legacy of all the families back then. And we still see each other in town. I mean, there's a lot more new people who moved into town, but the stories we have and how we're all ingrained together into this small town. My father-in-law went to this one-room schoolhouse, and Tommy Lynch, he's on the left, almost to the bottom, halfway down.
No, that's actually his father.
That was his father?
That's his father, yeah.
Well, all right, well, that's his father, but my father-in-law went to school here, and he's in that picture, School's Out Forever, 1951, and he's the one in the center of the picture with the striped shirts and the big ears. But there's a lot of memories, and it's really nice that we keep this. This is a nice, if we get a bigger crowd, maybe we should move it to the firehouse or pavilion.
His mother was the spokesman.
Right, yeah. Well, my wife, I'm divorced now, but my wife, when I met her, I thought I had a legacy here at Barnegat Light, but her dad went to school here. Her father was the Coast Guard, and Sinbad, the dog, was in air patrol. And then her grandmother was postmaster. So her legacy was way bigger than mine in Barnegat Light. And my kids today, they're all over it. Mike Thomas is in New York. He used to go in the Navy, SUNY Maritime. And then my other one's in Rhode Island, and it's Nathan's just go to OCC. But they said, Dad, don't sell the house at Barnegat Light. We love Barnegat Light, so it's great that we're doing this tonight, and the Larsons and the Puskases are really a big part of it.
Thanks, Tim.
Did you say something about Eric and George and what do you know about that? Spelling?
Eric and George Felling?
Yeah, no, but I meant George Spelling was one of the people that was getting all this stuff going too in town.
Yeah, he was the fish farm.
And all his kids, and
But my father and
But
George.
Gus Brindley,
Yeah,
Tim's dad was my first boss on a fishing.
Right, my dad actually, the
I
Persephone.
throw up every day.
This life raft was called, the name of the boat was called the Persephone. And my dad caught the torpedo. The German U-boat sunk this ship. My dad was out there and he got hung up one day and he was close to the wreck. He knew that the Persephone's a northeast wreck. Everybody knows it as a northeast wreck. It's really called the Persephone. And my dad gets close to it because he catches fish better to the Persephone. And he got hung up and when he hauled back, it was a torpedo that came up backwards in his net. And the two propellers came up, counter-rotating propellers on a 22-foot torpedo. So he called, I don't know if anybody remembers the Sandollar from Harvey Cedar. She was a dispatch for all the fishermen. She was like a hand operator. He called her and they called Lakehurst Bomb Squad and had a couple of frogmen come out and they dove on the net. And they went down and they said that torpedo was only 17 foot long. It was already exploded, so they brought it in. And my dad died in 2014, and we put his ashes on the Persephone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so every time I go by the wreck, I say a prayer.
Oh,
Yeah.
So his father's first head boat was the Snoopy, if anybody
Yeah,
remembers.
and my dad was good friends with George Svelling. There was probably a dozen names I could name. I didn't mention the Svellings, but everybody, I'm sure a lot of people know Jill, Eric, Diane, Candy, and Linda in that whole family. It's very instrumental. George had the fish market on 18th Street.
Which is now Cassidy's.
Yeah.
Well, it was Captain George, and now it's
Right.
Cassidy's.
And the party boat.
Yeah, the petrol.
Yeah.
But there's probably 10 families that I didn't. The Michalewski's Frank and his dad had the Ebby 3. His nickname was Shotgun Mike. We won't go into that, but there's a lot of stories, a lot of layers. But there's probably about 10 families, 10 or 12 families. And as you go back further and further in time, there's different generations. You got the Norwegians, you had Jens Jensen, you had
Bjornberg.
Axel Jacobson, and a lot of people will notice, but Mike White lives in Axel Jacobson's old house.
Right.
That's where Axel Jacobson and Ethel Jacobson used to live in Barnegat Light.
Big Ed Shoney.
And Big Ed and all the Norwegians.
Conrad.
Before my time, but I'm trying to be a historian and try to keep it going.
Frank, thanks, Timmy.
Diane, you ought to mention the mass on 11th Street was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So I remember that morning. Kurt probably remembers too, because Dad, much to my mother's chagrin, put a radio in the kitchen. So we were all getting ready for school. It was a really northeaster Tuesday morning, and I remember it came over the radio. Dad ran up into the attic because back then you could still see the inlet and whatever, and the beach, and all the kids were behind him. And then he quick ran back. He ran down and got on the first Miss Barnegat Light, the small wooden boat, and he went out. I think the Coast Guard stalled in the inlet or
You got the
something.
rope in the propeller.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah.
And then Dad got them off. So the mast that you see on the beach that's almost gone now. So Dad rescued them off that boat, and then he was also instrumental in getting the boat that they were pulling, to Prescott. He was instrumental. How many weeks? Mother said it was the next week, but that's
No,
not
it's like a
true.
month.
Yeah. So about a month later, on a full moon high tide, and you're talking March, Dad was, and they had dug around it with excavators a bit, and Dad got it off. And guess what he did? He jumped off and swam to shore and went home because it was right on 12th Street. So, Frankie, you want to tell us anything? You want to say anything?
Tell us about the shotgun.
Yeah, shotgun's great.
Talk about the blimp. He's got a blimp story. A good blimp story.
So this is Frank Michaelewski. He lives on 17th Street. And
You're welcome, thank you. I started working here with my dad when I was 13, running his charter boat. And we fished on the ridge, catching bluefish. And my job was to run the boat out and run the boat back and clean the boat up. I got $2 a day for doing that. Plus a tip if the farm charted up a tip. But that's, child labor. But then my father had some friends. This was his little charter boat that he had, was a boat called the Heavy 2, was built right here by Axel Sundquist, right here on 6th Street. And somebody was having it built, and they didn't want it anymore, and he ended up finishing it with Sundquist and launched it and had the boat for a number of years. And in 1959, he built a bigger boat. But anyway, getting back to where we want to go to, with the blimp.
Shotgun Mike.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's a story. When I fished with him, I don't know if it was the year I was 13 or 14, but for 2 summers I fished with him, and we stayed on the boat. But we had a charter out, and he liked to get on the outside of the fleet and find his own fish, and you throw chum in the water to draw them to the boat. Well, we were sitting ducks for the Beach Haven fleet, and they trolled, but they wouldn't chum, because chum fish taste terrible, and they get your boat all messy, because they spit up when you bring them up on the boat. But they weren't catching any fish, so the whole fleet, one right after the other. And there was a boat called the Henrietta III, which was owned by Henry Schoenberg, and his brother had the black whale out of Beach Haven. And Henny had a real powerful radio on his boat, and it had what they called a dynamotor on the old AM station, and he would blast everybody out. But he was sitting in his boat, and they kept coming back, and my dad got fed up with it, and we had a shotgun on the boat, a 20-gauge shotgun, single gauge shotgun, and we kept it there for the sharks, because when you're fishing, you get sharks, and you got to shoot the shark to kill him. So he got the shotgun out. The next time the whole fleet came through. When Henny started through, he picked up the gun and he kind of pointed it at the boat and pulled it down and fired it in the water ahead of the bow. Well, Henny had his arm out the window, and he fell right off his chair. And he puts on the radio that, he's being shot at. New York Coast Guard picks it up. The FBI was at the dock when we got there.
And the name stuck ever since.
Yeah. I was just a young kid. I witnessed that, and I think he might have gotten between his lawyer fees when they tried him, and they let him go that night. But when they put him to trial, I think it cost him like $1,000. Between that, this was back in the 50s, which was a good bit of money.
Hey Frank, tell everybody what your dad really did for a living.
Before that,
No, what he really did for a living. Didn't he have a hosiery business?
well, that was before we moved here. That's what. And then he got into.
Weird, isn't it?
He used to fish with the guy. He used to fish in Brielle with the guy who Kurt worked for here. The boat here was a salt shaker. He had a boat called the Big Bill 2. And I was on that as a little kid up in Brielle. That was Bus Loling had that boat. And she fished out of here. She was out of here for quite a while down at the dock there where the boats are. Somebody had bought it and finally it, deteriorated. But the publicity that my dad got from that shotgun thing really helped his fishing. He had I remember one winter for sure, he never missed a weekend that he didn't have a charter, at least one day. Even with the bad weather and everything, but he got out, at least one day every week. And then in the winter he cod fished, and I used to cod fish with my ex-father-in-law, on the weekends, and we would bait tubs and go out. And that's how I got to fish with Louis, because my father-in-law couldn't make a couple of trips because he had to work. And he worked up at Roadland where Kirk's and your dad worked up there for a while. I think he got him a job there. But we ended up fishing with Louis on a trip and took a friend of mine out, and it was that I worked with back in the mid-60s, and we went offshore, but it was really cold. We brought fish in, a bunch of codfish. We had to try to get to the inlet before dawn or dusk, so we could find our way through the ice floes. You know, and that was the boat that Kirk was on when they burned up. But we got through the ice floes. We got into the dock, packed out down at was Myers Dock. We had to chip the fish out of the ice to get them in and thaw them out so we could cut them and put them in boxes to ship them. That's what these fish were, you know,
Frank,
big bugs.
tell a blimp story real quick. This is an amazing story.
Well, in 1960 was the last year I was going to school up in Philly, and that summer I worked with Charlie Ebley on the Doris May 2, or no, Doris May 3, which was a wooden headboat, and down at 18th Street Dock, and we were blue fishing on the ridge, and Charlie decided to move, and we were going up north from the south ridge to the north ridge to look for fish. And all of it, I'm in the back cutting bait and getting things ready for, you know, in case we find fish. And the next thing I know, the boat speeds up and it's going wide open. And I ran up through the cabin and up the ladder into the wheelhouse up on top and looked out, and Charlie says, the blimp is just crashing. And this was a big blimp. The thing was a monster. And it had sagged, and then the whole nose ripped off as the pilot full power, and it crashed right into the ocean under full power with no nose on it. This thing was probably close to 400 feet long. The gondola was 75 feet long and 2 stories. 1 story up in the bag and 1 down below. And then it had a big frame in there for a radar that swung around.
How many people in it?
There were, I think, 23 guys. And most of them were young.
Was it a Navy blimp?
A Navy blimp out of Lakehurst.
What
They
year
were
was this?
1960, July 6, 1960. And the blimp even had on top, it had what looked like a submarine conning tower. And the guys used to be able to go up in there and climb through the back, and they could walk on top of the bag with a guide wire. You'd see them flying out here. They were called man ships, but they were huge.
Did everybody die?
Three survived. We pulled up. I had the people on the headboat get the life jackets down out of the roof, out of the ceiling in the cabin. We had them ready to deploy, and we pulled up and we seen a couple people in the water. We threw some life jackets in, and there were 2 guys together in the bag that was floating there, you know. And I'm up on the bow of this boat, which is pretty high. Well, I got my knife on me, and I just took my boots off, and I don't even know if I had a shirt on at the time, but I took that off, and I just jumped in with it and cut the guy free. And after doing that, there was a little boat pulled up in there. There was quite a few boats that came up from the ridge, because Charlie put it on the radio. And the small boat that was very fast, there was a Coast Guard chief on there who was stationed here, and it was off, but he was running this small boat, and that was very fast. And when I seen him, I said, oh, Mason will know what to do with this guy. So I put 2 life jackets under his arms and floated him over to the boat, and they picked him up, and all he had on was his t-shirt. He didn't even have any underwear on. And he was bleeding under, you know, from his bottom when they pulled him up, and evidently he had a broken back. But, you know, nobody knew it, but I talked to the guy. And then he passed away. They took him to the doctor on the light ship. And then I climbed all around the blimp searching for people, you know, looking on the bag. And the gondola was so long that part of it was sticking out of water. And it was probably as high as that lens sticking out of the water, maybe a little higher. It was one of the boats from up north. He pulled right up and had his bow right up in there looking down to see if anybody was in there. But I climbed all around the back, looking, trying to feel if there were bodies or anything. And come to, because the people that got out, they were up in the bunks in the second story. And they got their foot, worked their way through the bag to get out of there. The 3 of them survived.
I think I've seen that article in newspapers.com, and it has
Yeah.
a picture of old Charlie Utley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a hang on the ridge, Barnegat Ridge, and I always avoid it, and it turns out that's where the blimp. I never caught anything there when I towed my nets.
The Navy salvaged everything out of there and took it all to Lakehurst. But this thing was, you talk about, 95 foot long. That's like the Miss Barnegat Light now. That's how big the gondola was.
Right.
It wasn't a little thing like on this,
Yeah.
on the Hindenburg where they just sat down there and steered. But, there's a picture somewhere
It's in like a village.
Yeah. Of me standing in the back with a hoodie on, with knee deep in codfish. The trips with Lou were experiences. He was quite a character. And I tried to make one trip with your dad when the March storm hit here. He had brought the old Miss Barnegat Light that his father had over to Forkin River. And you were living up east of Columbus,
We were
or west of Columbus,
Yeah.
on the Columbus Florence
Right.
road there. And I drove out, I was staying in Florence then, and I drove out to the house, and then we came down and went on the boat. And we were gonna go fishing, and then you decided to come and check on everybody here, and we just made the day of it, so we never did get to go out cod fishing, or cod fishing.
Thanks, Frank. In my office, on Post Street, there's a lot of big old pictures of the boats, and there's an old sign there that says, "This boat goes cod fishing all winter long." The only day my dad took off was always Christmas Day, and then if it was really bad weather, where they couldn't get out. So, anybody else want to?
Yeah, Karen, I gotta say one thing, and it wasn't said today, was when Louis and John were really getting onto tile fish, they coined the phrase Barnegat Light, tile fish capital of the world.
Right.
And that stayed for years. But then when there was issues with the tile fish population, they pulled back from them, and Montauk never did. And then sadly, Montauk got the lion's share of the quota.
Right.
And some of the guys that were really instrumental in the fishery, Bo Buehler
And
Louis,
Yeah.
they didn't get nothing. And and it was because they laid off of the kittens and the little tile fish, only to let them rebound. And the guys, fishing, but the people that were on the council were the ones that benefited. It's kind of in that direction.
He said he had no history.
Yeah, Lou had right,
I
exactly.
remember him fighting that.
But it was on all the signs and on the trucks and stuff. It said Barney. I still can remember it from today. Barnegat Light, tile fish capital.
And then and right underneath that, it said, "If you like lobster, you'll love tile
Tile
fish."
fish. Yeah.
Judy, you want to say anything about growing up on Long Beach Island?
Well, the other thing to say about Mr. Puskas was that I was waitress at the Altry, and he came in, and we used to say that he was Billy Nelson, and there was a man that he would come, and his friend who looked like Julio Iglesias. and he let me eat his frog legs. He let me taste the frog legs. Yes, he did.
Altry had frog legs?
They did it was special one night.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm sitting here listening to you and your family and Ridley tell some stories. It's really just so captivating to hear that it was such a different lifestyle and it was so organic. I hate to use that word because it's so cliche, but that really is what it was all about. And just, survival. It's really amazing.
People ask me a lot, so what was it like? Because new people come to town and they're really interested in what Barnegat Light used to be like. And so questions I get, so what was it like growing up here? And
Bigger.
I really was. I'm really careful about the rat slippers. I just know kids roam free and so do dogs.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, our dogs were never. And another story I tell is when I went from 12th Street to 8th Street to visit my friend as a kid, you didn't go down to the highway and walk down 8th Street. You cut through everybody's parking lot. Everybody did that. And nowadays, I mean, thank God Barnegat Light is still a safe place. And I'm really careful who I tell this to, but what's Barnegat Light like? I'll tell you what Barnegat Light's like if I can trust you. You go to the post office in your car, you leave your car running with your purse on the front seat, your husband is checking your purse, you go get your mail, say hello to Green and Dorothy, and get back in, and you don't have to worry about a thing. Anybody else? We'll close up. I can't thank you enough for coming. Oh, I want to say one more thing. I was the babysitter in Barnegat Light. The Montgomerys, the Puskas, the Kittens, the Kidsons, the Sveltons, etc. But I used to babysit the Puskases every Sunday morning when Fran went to church. And this is the honest to God, this is the honest to God truth, because I'm not trying to be sappy, but they were the absolute best kids. They never gave me a problem.
That's not what Mom said.
Honest to God. I mean, you were just born, you know, for a while there. But they really were. They were really,
I had to live with it.
the Kidsons were the worst. So, all right, BarnegatLightMuseum.org. I encourage you to help us out. I can't thank you enough for a standing room only crowd, and feel free to
Spread the word.
yeah.